panel. So hello and welcome to the Indiana Farmers Market Community of Practice Maze webinar, Telling Your Market Stories, Building Knowledge and Relationships. I am Christina Ferroli, the Grants Program Coordinator for the Indiana Cooperative Development Center. We have with us Drs. Alfonso Morales and Edna Ledesma with Farm to Facts. Dr. Alfonso Morales is, he's a PhD in sociology from Northwestern University. He is also the Villas Distinguished Achievement Professor in the Department of Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He is also chair of the Department of Planning and Landscape Architecture. Originally from rural New Mexico with roots in family farming, there in West Texas, he is a researcher, advocate, and practitioner consultant on food systems and public markets. He co-founded Farm to Facts from the AFRI Metrics and Indicators for Impact, which is a suite of tools for collecting, analyzing, and reporting on local foods data. Currently, the Farm to Facts Toolkit for Farmers Market Managers operates in more than 100 markets in the United States and Canada. He also founded openair.org, which is a webpage on street vendors and public markets. He consults regularly with businesses and government on public markets, food systems, and street vendors. We also have Dr. Edna Ledesma, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the director of the Kaufman Lab for Study and Design of Food Systems and Marketplaces. The corpus of her research, teaching, and mentoring focuses on understanding the development of the smart, green, and just 21st century city. In particular, the cultural landscapes of migrant populations, microeconomies, and their development of a new understanding of city place. Her work seeks to bridge the gap between communities and city governments to help define the planning and design agency of Latinos, a traditionally underrepresented group. I want to remind everyone just to please remain muted during the presentation. And we do want this to be participatory. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you, or drop your question into the chat box and we'll address it during the presentation, or we'll have a Q&A at the end. Towards the end of this webinar, I'm going to drop an evaluation survey link into the chat and ask you to please take a few minutes to complete it. Thank you all, and welcome to Alfonso and Edna.
Wow, good morning, folks. Christina, thank you so very much. Appreciate the Hoosier Farmers Market Association and kind invitation to speak with y'all today. Let me tell you a little bit about the team that we've assembled over the years. For about 10 or 12 years, we've had a number of graduate and undergraduate students and doctoral students come through working for the Kaufman Lab, which I founded after the death of a dear beloved colleague, Jerry Kaufman, about 12 years ago. And Jerry was a great fan of local foods, but he was also a great fan of community development, largely speaking. And so the lab has attracted students from MBA students, PhD students in a variety of disciplines, undergraduate students in computer science, graphic design, nutritional sciences. So a host of different students have worked with us over the years. And most recently, a number of scholars from around the world have joined the lab. So that gives you a little sense of who we are. Now to kind of what I think is important to highlight for the purposes of this talk is I'd like you all to get a sense of, as market aficionados, get a sense of the history. For thousands of years, you represent a tradition of the marketplace as the intersection of ideas, as the intersection of economy, of social life, of political life. Marketplaces have for thousands of years been the realization of community spirit and community well-being. You know, you go to the grocery store, you see the magazine Cosmopolitan. Well, Cosmopolis, right, is the universal people. It's Greek for the universal people. In markets foster interaction and discussion across difference. And then of course, you found politicians, in the agora, the marketplace in ancient Greece. That's where politics happened, and trade, of course. And so markets have formed society for a long time. Now in Europe, in Europe, law, the fundamental trade law of the last 600 years in Western society was based on marketplace trade. And because trade needed law, it needed politics. In order for trade to happen, you needed to be able to get across the continents safely, and that inspired both law as well as alliances between the different kingdoms and different organizations. But for our purposes, marketplace inspired trade, marketplaces inspired contemporary law. Yeah, it's fascinating. I've written all about this. If you want to read a bunch of boring academic stuff, I'll send it to you. Anyhow, vendors matter a lot, though, right? It's not just managers, it's vendors. Because for vendors and for people who attend the market, consumers, markets fulfill a bunch of different functions: economic, political, social, health. I love this picture of the Dane County Farmers Market because it shows you the economy and the state in close proximity. Don't always agree, I'm not saying that, but they're in close proximity and they depend on each other. They're in reciprocal relationship to each other. You all know this from your work, both trying to regulate your markets and the activities of the vendors, as well as wrestling with state agencies sometimes in getting your markets done. And so telling your story is about data, and that is the focus of this presentation. But our next, in any particular time and place, can you switch for me, Edna? We've got a vision of people in a community, and we have their experiences, and we have choices that they're making. And so what we're trying to do as a team in support of this is we're trying to do both basic research, understanding the intersection of this vision, experience, and choices, and applied research, applicable research that enables you all to do more in your particular places. Next slide, please. So you might think about this in terms of your flow of action or flow of experience. As you're going along, you're trying to develop good standard operating procedures, good habits. You want everybody on the same page. But then there's a problem or opportunity. That's where then you have to engage that problem or opportunity. It shakes up people's habits. So we recognize that, and we're in support of reestablishing that flow of experience. Next slide. So let me take one more opportunity to review some contemporary history, just the last 100 years. 120, 130 years ago, marketplaces were the predominant way things got done, right? They were the predominant way things got done. Then in the 1920s, roads, better vehicular transportation, refrigeration introduced, go ahead and go to the next slide, Edna, introduced modern retail, and it changed occupation categories. You know how the census asks occupations. Street vendor was a census occupation category until 1940. Street vendor was important enough as an employment, as an occupation in this country for the census to count it. Then, of course, contemporary retail delegitimized the street. But in the late 60s, we know that markets never went away completely. And then in the late 60s, next slide, and there's all these new concerns that people started having with immigration, employment, and health that were the same considerations of 120 years ago when markets were being formed by cities to help with the unemployment and to foster food security. Same thing nowadays. We've got immigrants in our communities. We have food security problems in our communities. You all, as well as the cities that you live and work in, are interested in using marketplaces as a way to address these different concerns. Go ahead, Edna. Don't be shy. If anybody's got a question, you stop me at any point. Now let's think again, just sort of broadly about this. There's vendors who you're trying to recruit, and and there's activities in your market, and consumers, they want exciting places to go to, and you're trying to organize that in a particular city with particular government infrastructure, particular concerns, and you're trying to show the various benefits that you're producing, because those, you have a stream of benefits that you're producing, benefits in terms of health, benefits in making exciting, interesting places and public spaces. You've got economic benefits that are accruing locally, not only from vendors selling different things, but then people purchasing local and the money circulating more locally. And you've got other social benefits that we could talk about, that I've written about. But so in this milieu, right, you've got all these different considerations happening. And again, it's something we understand and appreciate the complexity of. Go ahead, Edna. So I'm not gonna, this is this picture. So that's my truck when I was a vendor at Chicago's Maxwell Street Market in the 1990s, in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And the gentleman that you see there, Steve Greenspan, he was an undergraduate student. I hired him to help me with my business. But the point here is this slide. I'm sorry that I let this slide sneak in. I've spoken to city councils, state government, legislators on Capitol Hill in DC. I've done a lot of different lobbying on behalf of markets. And I just want you to know that we know a great deal right now about how markets support food security, but incompletely. How markets support community economic development, but could be leveraged for more. How markets help make places more vibrant, but again, with the support of partners, market managers can do even more on behalf of their communities. So, and what they often need is information to tell that story, to get those partnerships established and activities underway. Go ahead, Edna. Oh, let me skip this one too, because I was telling the New York City Council, and they changed the law in small part with the support of my work on vendor violations. Anyways, and I think we better skip this one as well, Edna. Sorry about that. So how is it that we as scholars can support folks, market managers in their day-to-day life? Well, one, we can do things that you only find out sort of once a city has done something about it. So a lot of the work that I've done, that we've done over the years, helps cities change their regulations, change their zoning and their regulatory activities to foster more local food. We help them change their city plans, their comprehensive plans, to foster more resilient neighborhoods, to foster more local food production and processing and sales. So political and regulatory things happen. Now, of course, we're fortunate because in our country, we can do a lot. Our vendors can do a lot of things in support of the community. Our markets do a lot of work, but this isn't the case everywhere. If you remember the Arab Spring about 10 years ago, that was started by a vendor, Mohamed Bouazizi, who felt overly regulated in his market. The next slide shows you an image of he burned himself to death at his street cart in Tunisia because of how he felt about it. So one of the things that I recognize and have done work on here in the States, in LA, in New York, in Kansas City, is to support vendors and markets in their political struggles. Go ahead, Edna. So of course, one way to get more legitimacy is by providing data. And when you've got legitimate data, you can bring yourself into political processes with more than just a supportive face. You can bring both your interest in community development and show how it is that the markets and vendors are contributing in different ways to the local economy, to the local polity, to the local community. So again, data's and Edna's going to focus on that in the next slide. But we do know that there's multiple functions here. The market that I studied in Chicago, here is a business that changed owners over the years. When that picture on the left from the 1980s, and then this picture on the right from 2010, photos that I took of the market, what seems like some things have changed a lot, but other things stay the same. People want to get out and socialize. We want to give them a place to do that. People have things to sell. We want to give them a place to do that. People want to be entertained. We want to give them a place to be entertained. So there's multiple functions in this regard. Go ahead, Edna. Now, the way we operate, though, in trying to help achieve those multiple functions is we say we're not going to be the experts. We know a lot of things, but we're not the experts of what's going on in Bloomington. When Bloomington encountered some difficulties a few years ago with some social, political difficulties with some vendors who were a little racist, made the front page of the New York Times, they came over and said, well, we'd like your help. And we said, we're going to help. We will work with you the best we can, but we're not the experts on your situation. Let's work with you where you're at. You all are the citizen scientists. You're the citizens and you know about your markets. You're citizen scientists. So how can we support you in being stronger in your work, in being able to make changes in your bylaws or established bylaws that are inclusive and robust and responsive to your local circumstances? We can help you all do that. Go ahead, Edna. And so this, in short, then, is the power of knowing, right? Our purpose in the Kaufman Lab in Farm to Facts is to work with people where they're at with the knowledge that they have, refine that knowledge, develop it further, and then put it to work on the goals that you all have in your particular communities. That's our vision, co-producing with you. And I say this for the famous Hoosier Nobel laureate, right? Eleanor Ostrom, who was all about, she was a political scientist there at IU, all about co-production. She was all about trying to get the government and communities together to work together to produce a better life for everybody. So that gives you a sense of what we're about. Edna, is this where I hand off? No, here's the next thing. So I just want you to get a good sense of the history of this work. Now, prior to 2014, I've been a professor in markets for 30 years. Prior to that, I was just doing it one-on-one. A market would hire me, or a community would hire me, and my students, and we would go and do a lot of work, and it would be expensive because students are expensive, but it'd be great work. And so, but then it might take 6 months to do the work, and the manager wanted the information now. They wanted it pretty quick. So we said, okay, how can we do this? So with the Farmers Market Coalition, I became the principal investigator of a USDA AFRI grant. There we wrote this grant. Well, Stacy, the first director of FMC, Stacy, oh no, I can't remember her last name. She's a food entrepreneur now in Virginia. Anyhow, Stacy and I worked together on some other stuff in the 2008, 9, 10, and then wrote this grant when she handed off the ED job to Jen Cheeks, who's now Jen O'Brien, who then handed it off again. But anyways, so we wrote that grant and got it and developed Farm to Facts. And another platform, unfortunately, FMC didn't want to work together at the time, but that's another story. So anyhow, we developed this platform and started using it. And then 2014-16, I was on the local food, the USDA local food economics team, a national team working on local food economics. And we developed some tools that are available broadly that we use in the lab, that we use to help markets as well, and other local food players. And then most recently, I got a NIH, National Institute of Humanity, Institute for Clinical Translational Research, to develop, to add new metrics to the platform and develop health-related support for, especially around food security. Then a couple of years ago, we've been working with a bunch of different markets around the country. This year, we've had a dozen USDA and other food grant subcontracts, more than a dozen now, because we got 3 or 4 this year. National Science Foundation as well. And so the science of it continues to develop. We continue to work at the science, but we work at the science as much for how that then can be turned to support communities as for the science. We like doing science. I'm a scientist. I like doing science, but I like science in the public interest. So there we go. Is this where Edna?
I can see it from there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening so far, folks. Edna, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, no, thank you for the invitation, and it's really great to be here and speak with all of you. So Alfonso gave you all a really wonderful context, I think, to try to contextualize and understand the significance and the value of markets. And now I'll go more into the applied component and talk a little bit about sort of the profile of the work that we do within our lab, the projects that we're undertaking, and our trajectory. And so you could get a little bit of an overview of the kind of work that we do on the ground with our market partners. So we have, in this map, you're seeing the reach of what we do with our Farm to Facts platform. So as Alfonso mentioned, this platform is a citizen science-driven tool that is essentially, I call it a farmer's market census that operates in a way that allows us to be able to profile how the market operates, by looking at the market profile, the vendors, and the customers. And I'll get a little bit into sort of the various indicators and the variables that we collect directly with farmers market managers. But I do want to talk a little bit about how we operate. So we partner either directly with an individual market. So a market could have a direct contract with us. They're a member of Farm to Facts. They use the tool. We provide direct customer service, or we also work with farmers market organizations. So in this last year, we have contracted under a number of USDA awards with the Agricultural Community Events Market Organization out of California. We added 17 markets in the Sonoma-Marin region through a FMPP grant there. We recently expanded to 35 new markets through the Wisconsin Farmers Market Association. And last year was our first year, now we're on year 2 of our partnership with MIFA, the Michigan Farmers Market Association. So whether an organization has 27, 35, whatever the number of markets are, they get the same work and the same direct contract from us as an individual market would be doing, as a case of, say, one market in Rhode Island or one market in Texas. And so why we do this work? We do this work because for many of you, the work that you do, we know that the markets are important, but you need to tell your story. And the economic impact of that story is incredibly important for gathering local support. And by demonstrating what the capacity of shopping local, of bringing those dollars to the market, can show that we have a greater impact by keeping that money in our local economy than if that money is spent, say, at a big box store. So what we're trying to show is how can we aggregate the impact of that market to show that this individual market has impact on the local economy. So this is a picture of me working with the farmers market manager out in Brownsville. So we work directly with markets. Sometimes we have the opportunity to go directly to the markets and do some training on the ground, but we collect variables surrounding around annual sales, the years of operation of the vendors, looking at economic impact, so the number of jobs, part-time, full-time jobs that are actually being supported by the market, where the products are coming from, and how much consumers are spending at the market. When we look at how the customer data, we're interested also in mobility. We're trying to understand how people access the market. Are they walking? Are they able to carpool? Are they primarily using their individual vehicle? And I'm not going to get into it in this presentation, but another component of what we do is expanding into geospatial analysis, looking at not just the market itself, but looking at the market in context. So what is it? Where are the markets operating? And how is that surrounding demographic population impacting, or are they being supported by the market? And so when we collect customer data, we're able to track what are the predominant zip codes that the customers are coming from. And then we can correlate that with some geospatial mapping. So one particular component of what we have the capacity to do is to measure impact over time. And we are able to track EBT sales at the markets, track the number of repeat SNAP customers, measure the impact of double dollar programs that many of these markets have. And this is important for the markets because they can take that information, which is aggregated in the Farm to Facts Toolkit, and show it to their local boards or local municipalities and say, look, this last year, this program had this particular impact, and being able to secure additional support for the continuity of those programs. A number of years ago, the lab worked with the brown deer market. This was a particular contract under a USDA grant that was looking at how to increase EBT access in an area of predominantly marginalized, underrepresented minorities. And so the lab worked not only in collecting the data to try to understand that particular growth, but also at trying to develop a marketing strategy to increase that. The program instituted a community ambassador that was hired directly from the community. So this goes back to our citizen scientist approach. And that individual then served as the key connector to try to recruit and increase use of the market and the increased use of the EBT program. So in the first year that we collected data, I believe, let's see, the numbers are here. The first year that they had collected data around EBT access, there were $577 that were actually redeemed at the market. But by the following year after that marketing strategy and the community ambassador had been instituted, that program was instituted, the number increased to almost $4,400. So that was, I can't remember the percentage, Alfonso, of 750% increase in 1 year from that program. And we've continued to work with markets on similar strategies. And so, as I mentioned, our partners out in California, one of the things that we're starting to look at as well is what was the role of, or how did COVID impact our markets? We know that markets demonstrated that they were and are essential to our operations, to our livelihood. Having access to fresh air and the ability to socialize safely was important. We saw that through the COVID pandemic. But many markets struggled in the beginning to try to get people out. And so some markets, like this market out in Sonoma County, the Petaluma Bounty Market, they instituted an online sales program. And so this year we've been in the last 6 months trying to analyze what was the success of that online sales platform to try to diversify and increase the reach of the vendors and the impact of that. And I'm not going to get into the numbers, but I do want to mention sort of trying to strategize around what were clear peaks. So you see the data from early COVID and then eventually dropping down. Well, obviously the fear was a pretty significant factor, but also how that increase in customers. How do we actually take this model and begin to inform decisions about widening our reach for hard to reach populations? For this group, they're particularly interested in reaching out to elderly populations, particularly people living in assisted living, and how this model could be applied to increase the reach of the market. So just going to skip through these, but I will mention one thing that was pretty significant in looking at the data was the number of how six customers accounted for 51% of the total sales. That was out of $83,000 of sales that year came from half of that came from six customers. So that's pretty incredible. So what is it that those customers are doing? How do we reach out to them? How do we increase and continue to support them? So that's just some of the work that we're doing with our research team. And I'll mention that we're really excited that this past spring, we launched the ecosystem services metric, which is widening our ability to measure impact, not just of the market, but how the market, as it connects to farmers, how the various agricultural practices of our farmers can begin to be quantified and qualified for their environmental impact. So we're interested in looking at how diverse operations, so not something that looks like what we see at the bottom, but what we see on the left and the right, can begin to be aggregated based on soil health, the type of livestock, biodiversity, alternative power. And this is a tool that if you're interested, that we are offering, we're piloting right now for free. You don't have to be a member, you become a member for free and use this tool. We'll be doing that through the beginning of the fall season. But if you have some farmers at your markets that might be interested in accessing this tool, we're happy to share a link. And this is just an image of what the tool looks like, where you essentially take a survey, but you're able to aggregate the particular performance metrics. And that information, if the farmer is able to say, hey, I'm Farmer John, and I sell at the Dane County Farmers Market, then that data can be linked back to the market, and the market is then able to do a comparative aggregate of those numbers for all of their farmers that are involved with or accessing that tool. So the last thing I want to mention, I think we have a few more minutes before we have to wrap up and open up for questions, but the last thing I want to mention is one of the things that I'm very excited to be able to bring to the lab is I come from a design background. I'm a trained architect and urban designer. And so my excitement and my work within markets is very much in their value of civicness for the city, but also thinking about how many times markets as temporary spaces, as transient spaces can be vulnerable in asserting their presence. And how do we make sure that we allow markets to continue to thrive, not overbuilding, not over constructing, but also reinforcing their robustness and their place in the city. So in the middle of the pandemic, we partnered with the Fondi Farmers Market out of Milwaukee, and the city of Milwaukee's planning department, they were in the middle of undergoing a comprehensive plan update. And in that, the way that we did this through a course, so we partnered a group of a course within the planning section of our department and landscape architecture side. And we worked as interdisciplinary teams to address the comprehensive plan update of the Fond du Lac and North planning area. So just for context, those of you that are familiar with the city of Milwaukee, downtown Milwaukee is just approximately 2 miles southeast of this district, just down here. And this district is an aggregation of 5 neighborhood districts that have been historically underserved, underrepresented, have significant vacancies, and really is quite underdeveloped. But at the intersection of these 2 significant roads, Fond du Lac and North, is the Fondi Farmers Market, which is a thriving community hub. And also, I think, Alfonso, you could correct me, I think it's one of the highest, a market that has one of the highest redemption of EBT and double buck programs in the state of Wisconsin. So it's a pretty significant social anchor. So prior to the pandemic, the city had began their outreach and community engagement process, and then the pandemic hit. And so fortunately, we were able to come in and take that knowledge, take all the research from their various focus groups and meetings to then have the students build on the work and the work of the planning department and provide scenarios of opportunity for change. So for context, Here's the downtown of the city of Milwaukee. Here are these two busy roads or highways, state highways. And what you see all this green area is actually in the 1960s, this area had been slated for a construction of a highway that actually never came. And so they cleared the area. You have all these vacancies, and then the highway never came. So there's quite a bit of disinvestment, the market you see here on the left. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the work that we were able to produce for the study. And so we look at holistic approaches, not just for the market, but thinking about how the approach to the market is important, thinking about transit mobility, thinking about affordable housing infill, of social environments between the housing. So you begin to see, here's some images from the report showing the before and after. How do we infill those particular vacancies? How do you develop or design a bus stop that connects to the various programs that are already in place and maybe has connections to the economy of the market itself? It's a bike hub, it's a bus stop, it's a shelter for from the elements. And we think about in the possibility of there being yet another pandemic, how those environments of the street are places that are important for socializing, for gathering, and how we can begin to plan and design for that. And so I think this might be my last slide for that, just showing here's sort of a scenario of all of those elements coming together and all based around the idea that the market is that social hub, that social anchor. And by introducing choice for the community, we're able to design and envision a place for the community of the future that includes the people that are there. So just to wrap up and open up for questions, we are, as Alfonso mentioned, we are very happy, and I feel very privileged that the work that we do is not isolated by the ivory tower or the perceived ivory tower of academia. We very much value that our work is applied and directly connected to our community members, specifically with our farmers market, our market managers, our vendors. And we're excited to see the growth. We've seen a lot of growth the last 6 months. So but we are always open to more opportunities for collaboration. So with that, we will open it up for questions.
I think there was one in the chat, and Alfonso did answer. It was a question about if you have any details on the 6 customers. So that's kind of interesting, and on like what kind of data do you collect and how do you share that data? Yeah, and the details for which 6 customers? And maybe I don't remember where we talk about 6 customers. The one that had the most. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kelly's her.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll be able to dig more into it. It's an interesting partnership because we've been working with Kelly for a number of years. As a farm, she is a huge supporter of what we do, and she runs 8 different markets in that region with her husband. This is their life. Farming and supporting local farmers is their life. And so she has been a member of Farm to Facts for a number of years. Just this past year, we were successful in securing the FMPP, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. So part of that strategy was the FMPP is looking at developing, piloting and designing that sort of food delivery online sales expansion system. So we're only at the cusp of beginning to analyze that data, but we will get there. I mean, I think part of it too is it's like we've got 6 months of chaos, and obviously the numbers were through the roof, and then things sort of tapered down. But trying to understand the value, I do think there was another component too, where you had a lot of customers that became members of, like, they joined the platform and bought once because they had given, like, she offered them an incentive, like $20 or something to join, and they bought, but then they never came back. So there's sort of like the 2 extremes, and how do we understand those 2 sides of the story? It'll be really interesting to see who those people are and why they're incredible champions of of the markets. But we don't have that data yet.
So Christina, do you have a question? Because I think I could say something a little different maybe, but let's see. Or does anybody have a question?
Let's open it up. I do have a question,
Go ahead.
but does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to unmute and ask away.
Hi, this is Alana. I guess the root of my curiosity around that particular question is there starting to be any data support on who the typical participants are? I mean, I noticed that you did indicate 48% of that particular observation were one-time or first-time buyers. And I'm just curious, you know, what some of those elements are in terms of who are the people showing up, or is it so varied based on the demographic of your farmers market that there aren't consistent data to show who those people are coming to those locations?
Yeah, it's a great question, Alana. That's a great question. Which market are you at, by the way?
I'm actually with the State Department of Health for Indiana.
Okay, very
And-
well. Mhm.
And have worked on 3 food access grants. We do a lot of work with Christina, and there's more on my team that are doing even more direct work. And I probably have a little more of a business background. So I've heard some of the voices of farmers markets struggling with how do we attract a consistent group of customers. And based on what I saw of those slides, I'm just curious, is there data that would be useful to the farmers market if there's anything consistent at all?
Yes, so two quick things. One, just parenthetically, if you remember, if anybody remembers seeing an FMPP grant, what one of those looks like, and they have all the different metrics associated. So the Farm to Facts platform operationalizes all the metrics in the FMP, LFPP. And we, since we're the eggheads, we can help work with you to create the custom metric for your market. Now that aside, you're right, Alana, the location of the market matters as to the demographic. Let me say this though, work with Monroe, Wisconsin Farmers Market. Monroe is a southern Wisconsin community, very robust local food scene, very robust, and about 45 minutes away from 7 million consumers in greater Chicago. So when we worked with them, for 3 years we worked with them, and what did they discover? That their holiday market was strictly a local affair. Maybe people would drive down from Madison or over from La Crosse or something like that, or maybe the Quad Cities, maybe. But in the summer, in any given, using our visitor survey technique, which is not a lot of work, they discovered that as many as 20 to 25% of visitors in any given market weekend were from greater Chicago.
Wow.
And so Wisconsin Tourism was interested in that. And again, contingent on the demographics of the market, there's different programming choices or advertising dollar choices that you can make. And with the support of data, you can place your bets a little more productively.
Right.
And I will add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and that's exactly where I'm coming from. And Christina, I don't know if we're connected to anything Indiana tourism, but that's another interesting link for our farmers markets.
Yeah, I don't know what is going on there, but if you remember, we have the Indiana Grown Project now that is doing some marketing for farmers markets. It's a special grant.
Yes.
So I think there's room for the future to grow for
Yes.
Indiana farmers market community of practice to, you know, kind of identify what our needs are statewide, and with the you know, the opportunity to probably market, because we do know that in some of the counties, they do pull people from the other states. There's a strong Kentucky, Indiana connection. And then I suspect there's also one up in Michigan going on. I don't know about Chicago area and maybe along Illinois, Ohio. So I think there is lots of opportunity and potential moving forward to just see where those connections can be made and to strengthen them. And I think I understand your question, Alana. It'd be interesting to understand who those specific shoppers are and what their motivations were when they went to that market, as opposed to those 6 that continue to go back. Why is that the sweet spot for them? So I think there's a lot of questions that Farm to Facts can answer. Farmers markets, they can help municipalities. There was a question before we get too carried away.
I do want to add really quickly, just for contrast, the data around the online sales came from the online sales platform, which is not a Farm to Facts component. So, but within Farm to Facts, we do collect data for where customers are coming from. So we got the zip codes. And this is an example of one where we saw that only 10% of the customers were first-time shoppers. So 90% kept coming back, which is pretty incredible. And so we have, I think it's 8 questions for within our toolkit for the customer survey, and those are done. We ask vendor and markets to collect that data 4 times in the market season, and then we're able to aggregate that data and make estimates.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, so I think there would be interest about looking at markets, especially the ones who are on the state lines, and how, you know, data collection can really help them target, you know, and use their different parts of the state use different marketing techniques for sure. I know there was a question about Farm to Facts and vendors. Can they sign up to use your services? How would that work?
So the ecosystems tool is free right now for vendors, and a number of vendors we've noticed have downloaded it from different parts of the country and use it, and they can create a graphic. Now, I confess 2 things about our budgets. Okay, first of all, we are a cost recovery program of the university, so we do charge money what it costs us to run the show. So you'll see that for a market to join Farm to Facts, I think it's $350 for a year. So that's what we charge. Now, if you'd like more sophisticated analysis done, for instance, we worked with a market organization in Maryland, Milk Lady Markets, to do specific work on her marketing and to secure more funding from her community to support food security efforts that her markets were making. So she wanted to double dollar. She wanted to establish a robust double dollar program. So she paid us. We established what it would cost us to do the work. She paid that, and I think she got 4 times the value. I don't remember for sure what the report says. This was a couple of years ago, but she got a substantial return on her investment. Now the ecosystems tool, we're making it free because it's one, we think it's the public good, but 2, it's beta test, so it works, but we want somebody to break it because our coders, we pay our coders here on campus to develop the software code for all parts of Farm to Facts. We have to pay them. That's part of why we charge people. And so next year, if a market is part of Farm to Facts, then they will get the ecosystem services tool for all their vendors for free. And if a vendor wants to use the tool independent of the market, because the market is not a Farm to Facts, then we'll have to charge them a small fee. I don't know for sure how much it'll be, $20 or $30 a year, something like that.
Okay, thank you. We did have a question. Annika, do you want to unmute and, or no, maybe not.
So to answer Gina's question, it would be similar to what we did for Milk Lady. So Gina asks how to dedicate her advertising dollars to get folks from local, from the region to visit her market. So my answer is twofold. One, it depends how much time you want to spend, Gina, with your partners, right? Because you could call the tourism folks, they could help you, I'm sure. We could help you by doing some analysis. If you join Farm to Facts, we can do some geospatial analysis of the visitor data to see where they're coming from right now. And then we could help you develop a marketing plan we could look at your advertising budget and develop a marketing plan in that regard. I hope does that make sense, Gina?
If you scroll to the bottom of how it works, so if you go to our homepage and then just click on what we do, scroll to the very bottom, you'll see the breakdown. So depending on whether you're a market or a market with an org or an individual market, your one usually requires a little more support. So that costs a little more, but then the price will go down. And any other kind of custom support, whether it's marketing, custom reporting, you're able to output your own infographics, your own reports, your own tables of the data. You have access to the data at any time. The second you input the data, you're able to report on it. But if you want additional reporting, then that would be a custom report. And we would be happy to provide a demo to show you and walk you through the toolkit itself. Today was really more kind of like high level understanding of what we do and the kind of projects we've done.
We do have good service. We especially first year markets, they need all kinds of support, and we actually have office hours. We call it manager Q&A regularly, and we take calls or emails otherwise. But we have a part-time staff person, and of course, student employees who are really sharp.
Well, thank you. We're coming up to 1 o'clock. Please, I did drop the link for the survey into the chat, and I can post it again. Let us know. And if this is a topic you're interested to continue a little deeper dive with Doctors Morales and Ledesma, let me know, because we can always do something more with them. And please feel free to reach out to them if you want them to work with you for your markets.